Leiders en professionals van Nederland helpen nog beter te worden in hun werk. Dat is het doel van DenkTank, de podcast van Denkproducties. Mijn naam is Chris Kolen, co-host van de show. En ik ben hier samen met Denkproducties oprichter Hans Jansen.
Yes.
Welkom Hans.
Ja.
Vandaag hebben wij een bijzondere podcast. Want het is eigenlijk een podcast/webinar.
Ja.
We hebben een gast, maar hij is niet hier. We hebben de gast al gehad. Dus dit is een ander soort intro dan wij normaal hebben. En het gaat over Neil Pasricha.
Ja.
En dat was een bijzondere man. We gaan dadelijk een stukje luisteren. Maar Hans, geef ons eerst even een klein stukje achtergrond over Neil.
Ja, Neil is... dat zul je zo meteen horen. Als je de podcast luistert, kan je hem wat langzamer zetten qua tempo. Want die man zit een tempo is niet te doen. Fantastische spreker. Ik bespaar natuurlijk goede sprekers from all over the world. Dus elke keer kijken van, wie is goed? Een paar jaar geleden tijdens corona hadden wij een digitaal event. Dat deden wij, daar waren wij de Nederlandse partner voor. En daar spraken Brené Brown, Simon Sinek, Gary Vaynerchuk, de hele shabam. Allemaal goede sprekers. Malcolm Gladwell en Neil Pasricha. En dus ik zat zo te kijken en denk, ik ken die gast helemaal niet. En hij trok je naar het scherm. En je zat van begin tot eind geboeid te luisteren en te kijken. Ik dacht, die moet ik hebben. En zijn expertise is positieve psychologie.
Maar sterker nog, jij vertelde net van die hele line-up die je net noemde, dat hij de highest rated speaker was.
En niet met een beetje verschil. Echt bij een landslide.
En dan hebben we dus allerlei topsprekers die heel bekend zijn, die de grootste podia van de wereld pakken. En dan toen nog misschien een licht onbekende naam.
Uit Toronto, Canada.
Die klapte eroverheen.
Ja.
Vet.
En het thema dit jaar voor Amsterdam Business Forum is optimistisch leadership. Komt natuurlijk ook door onze hoofdgast Simon Sinek, wiens bedrijf A Bit of Optimism heet. En hij ook zichzelf pathological optimist noemt. En toen dacht ik, maar dan moet Neil erbij. Want Neil heeft natuurlijk een hele vrolijke boodschap, zul je zo meteen zien. Hoge energie. Dus die past niet in elk programma, maar in dit programma past die naadloos.
Ja, het gaat over optimisme. Het gaat over werkgeluk, teams effectiever maken daardoor. Ja. En ik moet zeggen, ik ben sceptisch over dit onderwerp.
Ik zag jou ontdooien, Christ. Dames en heren, ik zag Christ omvallen in de positieve zin.
Dat ik denk, we moeten ook gewoon gewerkt worden. Hè? En ik bedoel, tuurlijk is geluk belangrijk. Maar ik ben dan dat ik denk, is dit niet te soft? Maar hij heeft mij volledig omvergeblazen. Hij heeft mij overtuigd. De man weet zoveel onderzoeken. Hij weet het zo goed te onderbouwen. Ik denk dat we maar gewoon moeten overschakelen naar de opname. Dat de mensen het zelf kunnen horen.
Laten we het doen. Ik zou zeggen, pak even een glaasje water.
Normaal zou je zeggen sit back and relax. Nee. Maar het is wel sit back and hold on to your seat.
Dat is hem. Nou, let's go.
Bam.
Boom! It's coming through on March 20th, 2025. I'm coming to you live from my basement in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Hello, everybody. Great to meet all of you. I'm so excited to be flying over the ocean and being out there this fall. I can't wait to meet a lot of you in person. And my name is Neil Pasricha. I really appreciate you, Chris, and really appreciate you, Hans. I got like a Wayne's World vibe, from your introductions. I was like, I love the way it's like, you guys got a good natural like radio DJ connection. And I'm excited to spend 15 or 20 minutes hanging out and talking about optimistic leadership. I want to make this session kind of fun. There is not going to be no PowerPoint. It's just pieces of paper. That's my PowerPoint. So to let me know that you're here, that you're with me in the chat, which I'm using because I'm looking at here, give me a word to describe how you are feeling today. Give me a word to describe how you're feeling today. I'm already getting some words coming in. Hilda says, sporty. Happy, says LK. I'm happy, says, wow, says Kofi. Spring, says Philippe. Anxious, says Dirk. Understandable. They don't all got to be positive. We all go up and down. This is normal. Thank you for being vulnerable, Dirk. Inspired, says Anya. Sunshine, says Mariette. Brigitta is curious. Pablo's happy with the weather. Nicole is sunny. Vivi is assume. That's an interesting word. Assume. Positive, says Steven. So the words are coming. Thank you so much for making it interactive and fun. So let's take a little bit of a step back. Who am I? I was born September 17th, 1979 in Toronto, Canada. My mom is from Nairobi, Kenya. I know everybody calls it Kenya, but she calls it Kenya, and she's from there, so I go with Kenya, but Kenya, tomato, tomato. My dad is from Amritsar, India. They got married in England. They came over to Canada in the 60s. I was born in the 70s. I grew up here. When I was growing up, maybe like a lot of us, I kind of took everything for granted. Happiness, like, isn't this just kind of how we live? My dad would say, remember, you got power on in your house. You got water coming out of your taps. You got a school across the street. You got a hospital down the road. I didn't have any of these things growing up in a small village in India in the 1940s and 50s. But I was a kid. I didn't appreciate that at all. You know, I grew up, I grew older. In my 20s, I had a really bumpy road where I lost my marriage and my best friend to a suicide in the span of a very, very short time. I crash landed in an apartment in downtown Toronto, never lived alone before, never lived by in a big city before. I was living in the suburbs before. I was like, what are these big, tall buildings? And it takes me a long time to get back on my feet. It takes me a year to start online dating. It takes me a couple more years to like work up the courage to kind of like have a second date and a third date with anybody. I liked a lot of people, but I got ghosted a lot. Meantime, I'm writing a blog on the side to cheer myself up. The blog is called 1000awesomethings.com. It gets real popular, writing down little gratitudes like flipping to the cold side of the pillow in the middle of the night, right? Waking up and realizing it's a Saturday. Handing a string of green lights when you're late for work. The blog gets translated into a whole bunch of languages. It shows up over there in the Netherlands. There's a wonderful cover with like a silhouette of a boy on the swing in it. It was just beautiful. One of the best covers really of all. And meanwhile, I'm like stark single. I'm like not eating well, not sleeping well. I'm writing this blog. I'm trying to cheer myself up. Everyone starts asking me. They're like, wait a minute, you wrote this blog, 1000 Awesome Things? I'm like, yeah, that's me. I wrote the blog. I'm like coming home from work every night trying to cheer myself up with this blog. And then, you know, over time, it gets real popular. It turns into this book called The Book of Awesome. There's no need to buy this thing. It's literally just my blog printed out and stapled together. I mean, they really just put the website there kind of, you know, right on the cover. Like you don't got to buy it. It's just on the website. And the love life part, you know, it takes a while to kind of get back up, get on my feet again. I meet this woman named Leslie. Things are really clicking. We start to get some chemistry. We date for like a year. I ask her to move in with me. We live together for a year. And then I get down on one knee. I pull out a little box and I say, will you marry me? And she says, yes. So this is like a pretty big story compressed into like super fast, optimistic leadership evening webinar presentation mode. But if you can follow along, we get married, Leslie and I. So it's like my second marriage now. Remember, my first did not work out. And then we go on a honeymoon. And like the honeymoon, you know, you want to make it like a life-changing kind of event, you know? You want to make it like a big deal. So I think to myself, let's go somewhere we've never been before. Maybe we'll never get to again. We certainly haven't been to again now. And it's Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia. Has anyone been to Southeast Asia? What countries have you been in Southeast Asia? Like for us, this was like brand new. And we spend time in Bali. It's an awesome trip. See in the comments, you're going to learn, curious, sunny, satisfied, wonderful. And on the flight home from our honeymoon, Leslie's not feeling well. We have a layover in Kuala Lumpur. We're in the airport in Kuala Lumpur. Leslie's like, I need a pharmacy. I need a place to lie down. So we find her a pharmacy. We find her a place to lie down. Okay. Now it's boarding for the 13-hour flight home to Toronto, Canada. We get on the plane. We take off. We go 50,000 feet above sea level. We're above the clouds. She goes to the tiny airplane bathroom at the front of the airplane. She comes back to our seats and she says to me, I'm pregnant. And she bought the pregnancy test in the pharmacy in the Kuala Lumpur airport, and she did the pregnancy test in the tiny airplane bathroom at the front of the airplane. She says to me on the airplane, I'm pregnant. So I land home in Toronto. My new wife, Leslie, is suddenly pregnant, and I've been asked for years, since the blog got popular, since my books got popular, hey Neil, how do you be happy? Did you know it's the most Googled thing of all? Like seriously, if you go on Google and you type in how to be, guess what the first drop down is? Yes, indeed, it is happy. Literally numbers 2, 3, and 4 are rich, pretty, and real estate agent. Okay, so we all want to be happy. Everyone's asking me, how do you do it? How do you do it? How do you do it? And I was like, this is my opportunity. Like, I'm 9 months, like, there's going to be a kid here. Like, I'm going to have to reorient my life to take care of this kid. But I got 9 months. I got like talk about a deadline, right? Like, I got like a time ticking countdown to like my life gets like very busy. So I decide to research everything I can about happiness. All the way from 2,400 years ago when Aristotle said happiness is the meaning and purpose of life, to 300 years ago when Thomas Jefferson put in the Declaration of Independence. Everybody in the United States, arguably, we could argue about whether they did it or not, everybody gets life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Important legalese in there. You get life and liberty in the States. You don't get happiness. You just get the pursuit. You get to chase it. That's the actual language. All the way up to 1998 when Martin Seligman and Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi down in Pennsylvania, in the University of Pennsylvania, they say, let's start researching this. So from then till now, there's been all these studies. Positive psychology, they call it. Let's apply the scientific model to the study of happiness. I start wading through the data. I start trying to figure out this happiness stuff. And I eventually try to codify this into a 300-page letter to my unborn child, which I then published the same year he's born. And it is called The Happiness Equation. This book is literally the letter I wrote to my son with everything I could read, research, and distill, plus the experiences I had up to this point, on how we can be happier. And what better day than today, the United Nations, by the way, World Happiness Day, that's today. And by the way, your guys are like number 6 on the list. I think Canada, we slipped to like number 18, and I looked at the top 20. The States didn't even make it this year. Like, that's the lowest recorded ever for them. By the way, if anyone out there's Finnish, you're number 1. Okay, so this is the United Nations World Happiness Report. They track a whole bunch of data, including GDP per capita, trust in government, corruption index, transparency, and community levels. So there's like, everybody has their own metrics, but point is, today's the day. Today's World Happiness Day. Conveniently, I don't know, Hans and Chris, if you knew that when we planned this thing, but here we are. So if you're like, okay, guy, we kind of get you. We're excited to meet you in Amsterdam. We're going to hang out with you. We're going to have like your big, long presentation there, but here's a tight, small version. Give me a little takeaway. I'll say, yeah, okay, I'll give you a quick takeaway. I'll give you a little teaser. The teaser is this. The model we think about happiness that we grew up with is totally backwards. Most of us think that if you do great work, then you have big success, then you will be happy. If you study really hard, then you get straight A's. And if you're Indian, you become a doctor. Am I right? I mean, this is what my parents wanted from me. It didn't work out, obviously, but that was the goal. Or, if you work really hard, then you get promoted, then you're happy. Come on, I'm a manager. I want to be a director. I'm a director. I want to be a VP, right? And then we'll get happy. Then we get more money. Then we get more things. It's not just our parents saying this, by the way. Like, if you are a parent, don't you kind of say this too? Oh, come on, we want you to get into a good school. We want you to get a good job. We just want you to be happy. This is the most common parental wisdom of all. And based on the research, it's totally backwards. It's not great work, big success, be happy. It's the reverse. We got to train our brains to, put it upside down, Neil, why don't you? We got to train our brains to be happy first. Then we do great work, and then the big success follows. What do I mean? You do great work? I mean, when you show up to work happy, according to Saya Lubomirsky at the University of California, you're 31% more productive. You have 37% higher sales. You're 300% more creative than your peers. And by the way, you also show up as a better husband, as a better wife, as a better dad, as a better mom, as a better sister, as a better brother. There's a lot more relationship stability in the research there. And then guess what happens after that? Well, then the big success comes at the end. What kind of success? Happy people are 40% more likely to get a promotion in the next 12 months. So if it is career success you're chasing, hey, I'm telling you, happiness is an ingredient to that. And we kind of know that, don't we? I mean, don't you like working with the happy people? Bosses, don't you like the happiest member of your team? Don't you like it when your manager or your boss is in a good mood? We like happy people at work. They make work better. We know this. They get promoted more. We know this. But also, there's another kind of success that comes, and that is like longevity. According to the famous Nun study at the University of Kentucky, happy people live an average of 10 years longer. Life's not that long. We know this. Right? You guys know this. Life's not that long. We get like about what? Like 30,000 days? 30,000 days is the average lifespan right now. in your country and my country, like we're about 30,000 day countries, 83 years if you're doing the math. And I'm saying that the research shows that being happy gives you like a 3,000 day bump. I'm talking 3,000 more bowls of ice cream, 3,000 more sunsets, 3,000 more times kissing your kids goodnight. So this is a game worth playing for, something worth talking about. We're talking about it in a micro, little mini dose today, and then we're going to talk about an ABF in a kind of a bigger, more fulsome IRL way. But how do you be happy? How do you be happy? Okay, I hear your points. Thank you, Richard, for the comments. It's even we're number 5, says Ari. Okay, 5, 6. Hey, you're way ahead of us right now. But here's the thing. Nobody just wakes up in a good mood every day. I don't, you don't, we all, like, happiness is always the North Star. It's a directional thing. So how do we be happy, Neil? Well, I'll tell you what we got to do. I got lots of little models, tools, and frameworks. I'm going to share lots of them with you live at Amsterdam. But today I want to give you one. And the first question I'm going to ask is, how do you wake up in the morning? Let me ask a more specific question. Hear me out here. Put a yes in the chat room right now. If you woke up this morning and you could reach your cell phone. So put a yes in the chat room right now. If you woke up this morning and you could reach, you could touch your cell phone like it was like within arm's reach. Sydney, Johan, Karen, Nikki, Anala, yes. Eve, Mike, right, yes. I see a couple no's in there, but like obviously we are realizing that it's like what, like 90, 95%, 98% of us. And what'd you do before bed? Well, I got to check my cell phone. What if my boss emailed me? What if my sister texted me? What if someone commented on my Instagram post? What'd you do when you got up in the morning? I got to check my cell phone. What happened to the foreign markets overnight? What if my boss emailed me? What if there's something urgent going on at work? I mean, stop. Sometimes when everybody has an addiction, it looks like nobody has an addiction. You ever see the lineup for the coffee shop in the airport at like 4:30 in the morning before an early flight? Like, what's going on with our cell phones here? Cell phones are getting in the way of our happiness. We're looking at them, everybody else's texts, everybody else's notifications, everybody else's alerts. We don't have any time to process who we are, what we're doing in that precious liminal state between our subconscious and our conscious, when we're going from sleep into awake, when we're arguably the most we are. Like, in that time, we're like, someone needs this, someone needs that. Like, we should not be jarring ourselves senseless. Instead, what I really think we should be doing is a little practice that I say, move the cell phone to the other side of the room, put it in the basement if you can, put it upstairs, plug the plug somewhere else. Don't tell me it's your alarm clock. Buy an alarm clock. If you have a loud thing on your phone, just make that your alarm clock, but just from the base, like from the room next door. Like, make the thing beep somewhere else. And then in the first 2 minutes of your day, what I'd love you to do, the practice I want to share with you today as we talk about optimistic leadership is 2-minute mornings. I'm saying the very first 2 minutes of your day. My challenge to you is, could you write down these 3 things? I will let go of. I am grateful for. I will focus on. Eve, I love your plan on only your kids getting through. Richard, I like that you have 2 phones. Nice to put it away, but hey, could you put both of them away maybe? Hey, anyway, we can talk about that in person. But here, I will let go of. Catholics, you know what I'm talking about. Bless me, Father Fry. I've said, it's not just Catholicism, Buddhism, Mormonism, Judaism, Islam. I'm talking almost every world religion has a form of confession or repentance baked into the religious practice. I'm talking hundreds of religions over thousands of years. They all think this is the good idea. But you know what the fastest growing religion is right now? Over there and over here? None. In fact, your country, my country, the US, England, Australia, New Zealand, like, we're tipping into secular majorities now. More than 50% of people are no longer ascribing to a particular faith. Check the science as well. Science Magazine published a report called Don't Look Back in Anger by Dr. Brasson and her colleagues. You know what it says? All the religions are right. If you can write down something you need to let go of. I will let go of the nasty text I sent my sister last week. I will let go of the stupid thing I sent in the meeting. I will let go of the fact that I didn't say goodbye to my dad. We all got stuff we're stressed about, thinking about, worried about, sleeping on. Our cortisol and adrenaline is highest when we wake up, process it down, write it out. Research shows you crystallize and eject it. The Catholic confession chamber practice actually works. And then next thing you do is you write down, I am grateful for. Ammons and McCullough did a research study where they compared 3 groups of people for 10 straight weeks. The first group had to write down 5 specific gratitudes. The second group wrote down 5 specific events, things that happened. The third group wrote down 5 hassles or things that did not go well. Guess what? Over a 10-week period, the group that wrote down 5 gratitudes was not just happier, but they were physically healthier. Nobody went to the gym. Nobody did any bicep curls. But they were physically healthier just by writing down specific gratitudes. Key word in the study, though, specific. Most people, when you ask them to write down gratitudes, they say, oh, yeah, my husband, my kid, my dog. Not bad. Not good. What I'd actually suggest you do is write down, like, not my husband, but like, you know, when my husband Sven put the toilet seat down. Not my kid. When my daughter Karen, you know, learned how to ride a bike. Not, you know, my dog, but when the rescue puppy we got stopped peeing on the couch. All I'm doing is plumbing the archives of the last 24, 48 hours for a couple specific gratitudes. Doing so lights up area 17 of your visual cortex, which causes a doubling and tripling of the positive effects of your day. Okay, so the first thing on the list is like wiping a wet chamois over the blackboard of your mind. Get that spider webs out of there. Then you're putting a couple good things in. If this is a bicep curl, writing down gratitudes is a brain curl. You're teaching your brain how to focus on the positive. And we do not naturally do this. Our brains have an amygdala, and then we want to look at car accidents. We want to look at 1-star reviews. We want to look at, you know, the high cholesterol on the blood test. Our brains want to look for that stuff. We naturally want to look for that stuff. That's what led to our survival for 3 million years. Awesome. We can hear the saber-toothed tiger running at us. Hide in the bushes, baby. We know how to do that. But what we don't know how to do as well is look for the positives. And that's why this practice is so effective. Last thing on the list is I will focus on. Research from Don Tierney at the University of Florida shows that our decision fatigue is getting in the way of our happiness. Said another way, carving out one will do from your endless could do and should do list helps you focus on one big thing. Is there an atrophied email in your inbox from your boss that's been sitting there since Monday? Is there a project that you told someone at work you'd start but you haven't started yet? Is there a kid in your house that you haven't spent any one-on-one time with for a couple weeks and you can kind of feel that relationship like festering or fracturing a bit? I will focus on. Together, these 3 research-backed prompts provide a simple 2-minute morning practice you can do every day to prime your brain for optimistic leadership before you get out of bed. I'm not saying don't look at your phone. I'm just saying don't look at your phone right away. Now, we could go in a million different directions. I just saw that nice pink like pop-up thing. Questions for Neil? Ask them in the chat. Amen. Questions for Neil? Ask them in the chat. We're hanging out together. This is like a teaser. This is like an optimistic leadership like precursor. I'm hanging out with you. I'm hanging out with Hans. I'm hanging out with Chris. I'm hanging out with Asha. When she gets her sound working, I'm hanging out with Esther. We're hanging out with Leslie. We're hanging out. We're talking about happiness. I'm going to end my little mini talk right now. And then I'm going to pass things over to you and to Hans and to Chris. And we're going to have a fun little Q&A. I'll tell you this. There's no such thing as a bad question. There's whatever you're thinking about, other people are too. It takes courage to ask. There's nothing bad. Let's take the opportunity right now and let's hang out and have a little Q&A about happiness or anything else that's on your mind. Back to my radio host.
First of all, thanks, man.
That was a lot of energy and a lot of great stories and a lot of good tips, research backed. So we are already pumped up.
Yes.
And we see a lot of chats coming in, a lot of questions. So the energy is flowing.
Yes.
We like it very much. And we have some questions. And we were talking in the background as you were speaking. We selected some questions. Hans, can you ask the first one?
Yeah, there's also somebody who sent a question up front, whose name is Jules van Bomen. And she has a question on happiness and optimism in leadership. So I will quote it specifically because it has some nuances. So she says, what in your personal opinion and leadership experience is the most important thing leaders can and should be doing to help their employees employees stay realistically optimistic, especially during uncertain, challenging times like reorganizations, setbacks, changes, but, however, absolutely avoiding toxic positivity and blind or naive optimism.
Let's start with an easy, short question.
Let's kick this off with a gentle one, right?
But we know you can.
Sure.
Yeah.
Jules via Hans, appreciate the question. My last job at Walmart, and I was there for a decade, was director of leadership development. So it means in a 2.5 million person company, I was responsible for helping managers become directors, directors to become VPs, VPs become SVPs, SVPs become C-suites. I'll tell you straight up, the number one derailer for all leaders at all levels across the entire organization is EQ. Said another way, empathy, compassion, understanding. Like, we might consider those soft skills. They are the hardest leadership skills to grow. And Walmart's like a lot of companies, you know, at some point when you're going up in an organization, you know, if you're not nice, you're not going to get promoted. Like, Tony, you're awesome at your job, but nobody feels good about themselves when they leave their meeting. Well, Tony's not going to get going up a level. And so Tony's derailer is that EQ side. And you know what? I can't ship Tony off to empathy class, compassion class, understanding class. They don't exist. Have you ever been to empathy class? Like, tell me what that was like. There isn't one. We know that there are ways to however, teach empathy. One of them is reading fiction. You know, you read fiction, doesn't matter what it is. I got some fiction here beside me, just randomly. Here we go. That happens to be a sci-fi day over here. You know, you read fiction. Here's another one. Then guess what? You put yourself in another gender, in another time of the world, in another species. You're a mice in this one. Another place in the world. So you grow your skills that way. And in terms of what you can say to your employees or your direct reports, I'll tell you the three most powerful words for a leader are tell me more. Not to direct, not to solve, not to say do this, not to say do that, but simply to provide the energy required and the time required to be a listening sounding board. What most employees need and don't get enough of is someone above them saying, what's going on? You start to say, oh, yeah, well, it's a little challenging with this deadline. Tell me more. Oh, well, we got this project assigned, you know, on Monday, and like I'm trying to work with 3 people. Somebody's been sick, you know, tell me more. And so what happens is the person will slowly start to open up like a flower, and you as a leader are simply saying those 3 words. You do so calmly, slowly, gently, and at the end of it, you don't solve the problem. You're not looking to say, do this, do that, point this. Like, I like the question, Jules, like, avoid the toxic positivity. I'm not going to say like, well, just grin and bear it. We got this, guys. I'm not saying do that. I'm saying say, tell me more. 3 words over and over. Listening, venting, providing the safe space and the structure to help people process, understand, and figure things out for themselves in a safe space is missing from most organizations, especially the higher you go, where the expectation is that you will just handle you. No. Leaders, tell me more. 3 most positive and most optimistic leadership words I can share.
Bam. Nice.
A real nice question. We have questions from the audience as well. I keep sending them in. Mella, for instance, was one of the first people to ask a question. And she says, I think she's asking for a friend, but she says, when you don't wake up optimistic, how do you switch? But it can also like work, be during your working day. I mean, if something happens and you're, you know, just have a bad day or, you know, things are not nice. So how do you switch it up? How do you make the switch?
Yeah. Okay. So thank you, Mela. And I appreciate, by the way, that every time you say someone's name, Hans and Chris, you're telling me also how to pronounce the names, which I really appreciate because I'm like following your lead here. Yeah. Mela, so okay. When you wake up in a bad mood, I want to say, first of all, like, one thing to avoid is the self-critical voice that says, like, I shouldn't be feeling this way. There's a problem with me. There's a problem with my day. It's okay. It's okay. You know, Sonia Lyubomirsky, who I quoted earlier, wrote a book in 2016 called The How of Happiness. She shows that happiness is actually 50% genetic, 10% circumstances, and 40% intentional activities. So this is the place that I'm playing in, okay? Like, there's a genetic component, there's a circumstance component. You had some bad news yesterday. Your genetics, you wake up in a bad mood. We all do. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, if you're asking me, okay, well, I don't want to feel that way and I want to get my mood going, I'll say 2 things. Okay. Number 1 is I gave you a 2-minute morning practice. It's a robust practice. It's a detailed practice. It's a research back practice. I want to remember this. 2, though, I will say this. There's research also from Pennsylvania, interestingly, that shows that having 3 20-minute movement breaks a week, which is not very much. And I know you get way more than that. Probably most people do. But if you don't, heads up, moving makes you happier. If you add in the ingredients of fresh air and exercise together, it makes us happier. Why? Trees release a chemical called phytoncides, Phytoncides. I'll put it in the chat right now so we know how to spell it because it's a crazy word. Phytoncides. What does that chemical do when you breathe it in? It reduces cortisol. It reduces adrenaline. It reduces the naturally occurring physiological stress hormones that occur in our bodies. So one way, if you aren't feeling happy, is just get outside and go for a walk. Just get outside and go for a walk, like before your day begins. Like, I know it sounds easy, but it doesn't mean it's easy to do. But get outside, go for a walk, use the 2-minute morning practice. Those are 2 big ingredients, I would say. And if neither of those 2 things works and you're still like, come on, Neil, give me something else, I would say, grab the phone, call a friend, or send a little 2-minute voice note to somebody. Number 1 ingredient of long-term happiness, according to the 1938 Harvard Adult Development Study, is the strength of our relationships with our friends and our family. We are living in a lonelier time than ever before. We got 1,000 friends on Facebook, but nobody to feed our cat. So just sending a little voice note or a text message or exchange, or that group text you have with your old buddies. Okay, there's a connection piece, there's a movement piece, and then there's that journaling prescription I gave earlier in the talk.
Great. Thanks, Neil. Your speed of talking is amazing. I mean, sometimes I listen to a podcast and I put it like on 50% extra, but I think I'll put it on like 50% less. But great, there's so much condensed wisdom there. Karen has a very good question, I think, because we talk about, how to get happy yourself, but of course we also work with other people. So how do we not let external negatives influence our internal positive vibe? Because that's kind of a thing, right?
It's kind of a thing, right? Absolutely. So basically, what I would say is, look, it's weird inside organizations because there's both the old adage, what interests my boss fascinates me. Okay? That's like the sort of old proverb that, like, what interests my boss fascinates me, because if I get fascinated in the thing that my boss is interested in, I will be able to show my boss that I have a demonstrated competence and ability and interest and acumen in the thing that they care a lot about. So that's great for my career and for them. And at the same time, what I want to teach everybody here is a 2-word phrase that is called creative indifference. And so the flip side of that adage that I just mentioned is this idea that, at the end of the day, like, you're just you're you control your work, you control your time, you control your days, you can only control you. And so the concept to think about is, how do I have a healthy, it's not like a rude, it's not like you're not ignoring their notes or whatever, but it's like, you just have to hold on to this idea that I have to be creatively indifferent to my boss's flip-flop moods. And you didn't ask me how to change my boss's moods, because what I would say to that is, most people don't change if you tell them to change, but they change through social pressures. So if you, for example, at work wanted to get started like a running club, well, you shouldn't just put up posters and say running club. You should just take your running shoes and start running at lunch, and then you come back a little bit sweaty at your desk after lunch. You start saying to people, well, I started running at lunch. You want to come with me? You get 2 people, it's easy to get 4. You get 4 people, it's easier to get 8. Now you've influenced the group again through social signals. But you didn't ask me that. What you asked me is, okay, how do I ignore or not kind of internalize the bad mood that others I work with have? And that's where I want to kind of hold on and remember this 2-word phrase. Practice creative indifference. Remember that you only can control you at the end of the day.
Great. So we talked about yourself. We talked about others. If we talk about teams, I did some research. I listened to a lot of podcasts preparing for this session. And can I have a personal request mode? Because I really liked your 4S models for teams, because I thought it was such an easy, understandable way of looking at how to develop talents in a team.
He's going to make a special card for you, Hans.
Oh, great. Yes. Good.
I always bring blank paper. Anyway, this is a model from the book, A Happiness Equation. And it's also so nice that you said specifically what you were looking for in the answer, because then I can do it. Because I was like, okay.
What is he asking?
But here's what I'm going to say is, one thing that this doesn't work is when I just type, I spell my own words wrong. So I'll start again. So there's 4 things that we're looking for in teams, and they all start with the letter S. Okay. The first one is social. I already mentioned, well, I didn't really say it directly, but we are the most social species on the planet. Okay, humans have, for our 3 million Homo evolution, or 300,000 / 400,000, now they're saying Homo sapiens evolution, learned quickly that if we do not support the other members of the tribe, then they will not support us. And because we're not stronger than a chimpanzee, and because we cannot outrun an elephant, and because we cannot beat up a rhinoceros, I'm telling you that the only advantage we have is our ability to kind of work as team. That's why 1 million years ago we figured out that ostrich eggs kind of hold water. We figured out like long straws can kind of pull water out. We figured out the digging big pits. For those that have read Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari, you've heard all this stuff, but it's our social skills that give us satisfaction. I mentioned the 1938 Harvard Adult Development Study. #1 driver of long-term happiness is the strength of our relationships with our friends and our family. So in our teams, we need to have a social component. That's why I'm a fan of, obviously, working together in person, but I'm also a fan of like hanging out before or after work, at lunch, doing lunch and learns, doing, breakfast with the CEOs, like the running clubs I mentioned. Like there's a social element. When that is fulfilled, we feel great about being there. No wonder some engagement surveys ask people, do you have a best friend at work? Like, why are they asking that? Because we know the data suggests that when you say yes to that question, you love your job more often, right? Next, there's a structure component. Okay, so every single week is 168 hours, means you got 3 buckets of 56. You got a 56-hour bucket for sleep. That's 8 hours a night times 7 days a week. You got a 56-hour bucket for work. Well, that arguably gives you a 56-hour bucket to do whatever you want. However, similarly, within work, what we find is that people, and this is why retirement is a dangerous concept for a lot of people, we find that people really respond well to having a kind of, like a reason to get out of bed in the morning. They have what's called in Okinawa an ikigai, I-K-I-G-A-I, a reason to get out of bed in the morning. So work and having a team that you can trust and rely on provides that structure, and that structure can be very enabling for people. #3, other thing you need in a team is stimulation. We are learning animal stimulation. Means, am I learning something new every day? If you can say yes to that question, you're on a healthy and productive team. If you say no to that question, fine. If you say no to that question for a long time, it might be time for a change. You want to find a team where you are challenged to enter flow states, which means you have the highest possible combination of both challenge and skill. Challenge means hard to do. Skill means I'm really good at it. The combination of those 2 things is a word coined by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, which is called flow, F-L-O-W. That's stimulation. Do you enter flow states? Do you find yourself always learning? And of course, the last S is story. Story means, am I part of something bigger than myself? In some organizations, that might be a very captivating mission statement. Maybe we're helping to feed people in this country, or we are organizing information, or providing we're providing this particular software that helps achieve, access to healthcare. That's a high-level mission statement, right? But I call it a story. Like, do we as a group, are we able to do something together that we couldn't do as individuals? And if the answer is yes, that means that we as a collective have a collective purpose. That's called the story. Together, these 4 things, social, structure, stimulation, and story, form a 4S framework for what we want and need in our teams for them to thrive.
Amazing. Thank you, Neil. I think we have room for one more question, and I think that we have a viewer from Ghana, right? Who is Kofi, and I think we should reward him with the story, because that's he's the most. I think he's the most remote.
The most international guest.
And he perhaps it's also a good thing to wrap up with, because Kofi says, I'm too self-critical. How do you get out of the cycle? Because you can say, okay, you have to be, positive, happy, optimistic. But what if you are kind of critical by nature? Is that a force you can fight?
Yeah, it's interesting. There has been a lot of literature written about how the last century that we entered in, especially the last couple of decades, you hear this phrase like the me decade, or, I always think about when Steve Jobs introduced the cell phone camera on the front of the iPhone, not the back of the iPhone where it had been historically, but the front. And it was obviously to enable selfies and the self-orientation. And I think social media has very naturally, and I'm not saying, Kofi, that this is you necessarily. I'm just going to speak at a high level here for a second. Social media has naturally exacerbated this premise where like there is sort of this weird pressure on all of us to like, cultivate a brand and have we all got to have like 500 connections on LinkedIn, and we all got to be like kind of, like looking the part and dressing the part. Like that's a lot of not only self-pressure, but it's also a lot of like self-obsession. And so I just think that like one element, there's many ways to answer this question. I'm just going to give you one particular rant right now. And the rant I'm going to give you right now is that we need to take ourselves out of ourselves. Nature and walking and exercise, that's one way to do it. You cannot, if you're doing burpees, or if you're like running on a steep incline on a treadmill, it's going to be really hard to like sort of like manifest and to ruminate about because you're huffing and puffing, right? But another way to do it is to read fiction. According to the 2011 Annual Review of Psychology, when you read fiction, they've done MRI scans on this. Like you're not you. It sounds so crazy to say this, but it's particularly fiction because when you read, my stuff or like 7 Habits of Highly Effective People or like Good to Great, like we're still in that sort of left brain corporate mode where we are trying to like develop a new skill and so on. I get all that. But when we read fiction, the research shows that we actually use more of our brain than consuming any other form of media, which means that reading a book is far better than I know it sounds obvious, than like watching a Netflix video. Because when you watch like Big Little Lies on Netflix or HBO or whatever, and I don't know if I'm getting all the streaming platforms right over there, somebody else is the director. They chose the actresses. They chose the costumes. They chose the set. They chose the music. And we have this like passive kind of receiver vibe. Whereas when you read the book, you're the director. You're forced to, in your mind, think of the set, think of the actor, think of their voices. That's all on you. And what it also shows that it does is it takes us out of ourselves. So what's my counsel? Read 2 pages of fiction a day. It'll help you to sleep. It'll take you out of yourself. It'll put you somewhere else. And it grows the hardest leadership skills of all to grow: empathy, compassion, and understanding. So again, many ways to answer the question, but we have a limited time. So I'll give you one, which is go get the exercise I mentioned earlier. And if you can't do that, read 2 pages of fiction a day. Take yourself out of yourself a little bit. We all do this. It's my heart open offering with the limited, 1-sentence text I have. That's what I'm offering you there.
Nou, dit was Neil.
De tandjes.
En volgens mij hebben wij van tevoren niks te veel gezegd, beste luisteraar. Want het kan niet anders dan dat je zojuist bent weggeblazen door zijn energie, zijn optimisme en zijn wijsheid eigenlijk.
Ja, en als je deze podcast luistert op bijvoorbeeld Spotify, je kunt hem ook op YouTube kijken, dan zie je Neil ook nog in beeld. Which is nice. Want hij heeft ook een hele leuke presentatiestijl, hè, die jij nog kopieerde. Hij heeft geen slides, maar hij houdt gewoon steeds kaartjes in beeld met woorden en teksten erop. Nou, in elk geval, bruistabletje XXL on steroids.
En wat je dus moet weten is dat deze Neil naar Amsterdam Business Forum komt op 26 september 2025. Samen met Simon Sinek, samen met Sanna Marin, samen met Peter Hinze. En samen met, heeft zij een hele moeilijke naam met...
daarom ben ik er. Ik ben er voor jou. Gooi hem. Eliza Philby. En dat zijn 5 echt kanonsprekers. Dus ik denk dat Neil zal wel de hoogste energie hebben. Maar de rest doet er inhoudelijk niet veel voor onder. Maar dit is toch ook lekker. Als je zit en je denkt, kom maar op. En dan gaat iemand zo tekeer in de positieve zin op het podium. Dat is natuurlijk heerlijk om bij te zijn. Ook voor mensen met ADHD.
Optimistic Leadership, 26 september. Zorg dat je erbij bent. Als je deze verhalen van Neil interessant vond, stuur het door naar je collega's. En vergeet niet te abonneren op deze podcast. En hopelijk tot de volgende keer. Dankjewel voor het luisteren.
Bedankt.